Good evening, everyone. This is the episode celebrity special tonight with Taj Jackson. Waiting for obviously a few people to come in and Taj himself to come in. All questions are welcome. You can ask them. They may not get asked straight away, but throughout the night, hopefully, we will ask them as many as we can throughout the time on the live. So yeah, as I was saying, they are welcome questions, and we try our best to ask as many as we can throughout the night or at the end of the story and our chat. So let me get Taj on. Hello.
Hey, Jamie.
How are you?
Good, doing well, doing well.
You all right? Before Zoe goes up, she just wants to say hello.
Hey, how are you? It's been a long time.
It has, very long time.
Oh, I'm happy to see you.
I'm happy to, well, I can't see you, he's got the phone around the other way.
Well, good. At least I get to see you. Well, I'm very happy to see you.
Shield your eyes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right then. Okay, yeah. So, obviously for the ones what don't know you, which I don't think there will be many, but let them know who you are, and what does mental health mean to you? The first question.
Yeah, my name's Taj Jackson. I'm son of Tito Jackson, the nephew of Michael Jackson of the Jackson family. I've done music my whole life. I'm in a band called 3T, and yeah, that's pretty much it right now in terms of, quick description, also direct as well, but we'll get into all that stuff. But mental health to me, it means understanding for me in a way, because I think we have to be open and understand each other instead of just, I think we're so quick to rush and judge people, and we don't know what people are going through. We don't know what, I have a cousin that has a mental health issue, and now she's an advocate, my cousin Yashi, and very supportive of her, but I would have never known, in that way, and she's my cousin. So I think you have to be open, you have to be understanding, and it's a serious issue that we all need to take, not only serious, but we also need to embrace.
100%. So that's a good, obviously, first thing to start. Normally on a Thursday, what I do is obviously it's a 1-to-1. On a Monday, it's normally 4 people come on, and it's a 15-20 minutes. So on a Thursday, we normally open up and allow the person obviously to come on, and they might have had mental health issues or been around family what have had mental health issues, or even just their story is like an inspirational story. Obviously, with you, there's a lot gone on over the years, and you can open up as much as you want, and everything like that. So, really, the floor's yours, and obviously, I'll stop you as we go along with little.
Yeah, please ask questions, like in terms of interject, because even though I seem to like blab, I really don't. It's just something that I've kind of stepped into in that way. I'm naturally shy person, but yeah, I mean, I growing up in the limelight, I would say that my birth was covered in magazines, Jet magazine and stuff like that, and so I always knew that I was kind of not only carrying on the name but representing the name from a young age. And so there's certain things that, other kids get to do, they get to mess up. They get to go to, underage drinking parties and stuff like that. Well, better, because that if the cops come, that's going to be headlines in the paper. And so there are certain things that I would have to dismiss myself from my best friends, that I wanted to be there so bad, but it was like, I have to think about the name. I have to think about the legacy. and what it means to that. And so that's kind of how my life has been up until this point, is always thinking about the legacy, thinking about, what does it mean for, if A, B, and C happen, what does it mean for our family? And I've lived that way my whole life. And I would say from a young age, me and my brothers wanted to do music. We saw our uncles and our dad perform, and we knew that that was what we were going to do. Probably, I would say I was 8 when I knew I wanted to professionally be a musician and sing. And my dad would train us and work with us and stuff like that. And, TJ was so young back then. TJ is my youngest brother. He's 5 years younger. So he was like 3 years old. He was like, still in diapers when we were rehearsing and stuff like that. And Terrell's was 6 at the time. And so it was always a passion for us, but it was our mom who was the driving force that was like, okay, you want this, you're going to work for it. Our dad was kind of the softie, which is kind of funny because you wouldn't think that in that way. And so our mom would make us come home from school and rehearse every day. And if we didn't rehearse, she would threaten to pull she would say, okay, well, you're not doing music then. And then we would cry and be like, no, Mom. And so we knew what we wanted to do way early in life. And we worked at it probably for a good 10 years before it actually came into fruition. But, and why I'm telling you this is because there's something with my mom that comes later on that's like was the driving force for us. And when you lose that, which is a little spoiler, but we had our mom our whole life kind of driving us to be something that we wanted to be. Our mom was always there every baseball game we had. It didn't matter if it was the 3 of us were playing 3 separate fields. She would be there. It would almost like she was there at every single at bat. For some reason, she was like a superwoman in that way. And so I grew up with so much support from my mom. She was my best friend. She was someone that I couldn't wait to come home and just hang out with. And then she naturally became our manager with 3T when we signed with Epic, and with Free Willy was our first kind of major project that we did. Our Free Willy soundtrack, we're on that. And then it was in between the Brotherhood album that my mom was murdered, basically. And so half of that album is songs that she loved, and I can hear her still play those songs or like talk about those songs. And then the other half of the album is songs that she never got to hear.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for us because when your main cheerleader is no longer there and your best friend is no longer there, what do you do? And I made the mental decision not only I did, my brothers as well, to finish this album in honor of her, because this was her dream as well, to see her boys succeed. And so we kind of had to muster every kind of feeling we had and put it on the back burner and put that energy towards finishing the album for her and dedicating it for her. And my Uncle Michael was a great champion of that. He was there every step of the way helping us. And that kind of, with him and the rest of the family cheering us on, and our friends, which is something that I don't take for granted, because I know a lot of people that go through things like mental health and stuff, sometimes they don't have the support system. We were lucky to have that. Our friends stepped up. And so I feel very privileged and lucky in that scenario, because that doesn't always happen. No. And so through that, we were able to I don't want to say bye, we were able to kind of finish the album and then release the album in her honor. And that's all we wanted to do. And then the song started taking off, and then it felt like, okay, we have to succeed for our mom. Like, basically that was her dream, to see her boys succeed, as brothers. And that's what we put our heart and soul into. But that was probably the hardest time in my life, because it was just in 1 second she was gone, in that way. And especially I had a lot of guilt because I was the last one to talk to her. I remember she called really late at night, basically saying that she was going to stay over this guy's house, which was her boyfriend at the time, or ex-boyfriend at the time. Yeah. And I was exhausted. So I was kind of like, okay, Mom, yeah, whatever, Mom, okay. That kind of scenario. It wasn't like, if I would have known that was the last time I would have talked to her, I would have probably tried to get her to come back home, or I would have just talked to her longer, but I was kind of like, my sleep was more important. And it wasn't until after I went to sleep and I actually woke up feeling like I was drowning. Like I felt I was restless and whatever. And I woke up, and I remember Terrell, he was in the room across the way, and he had received a phone call. I didn't even know this at the time, but he comes in saying that mom was in an accident, blah, blah, blah. And already in my heart of heart, I already knew the worst. Like I felt the worst. I felt like she was no longer here. I felt the struggle. I felt everything. And so I drove to the hospital, well, first to his house, and then they relayed us to go to the hospital, knowing the worst. Like that drive, some I don't remember which brother, but one of them was like, "Oh, what did mom do?" He was like more optimistic, like, I just didn't say anything. I just felt the worst. And I'll never forget, I got to the hospital and the doctor just came to us and he's like, your mother's dead. Like he didn't sugarcoat it or anything. And I wasn't prepared for that. Like that was just a shock. And it's still a shock to this day how he relayed it. He wasn't like, come here, sit down. I want to tell you something. Your mother had an accident, and it wasn't that at all. Like, and I kind of wish that he would have prepped us into that. I already felt it, but it was such those words. I'll never forget those words. And so it was, and then we had to relay it to the rest of the family and calling our dad, who, at that time he wasn't with my mom, they were divorced, and he had a certain amount of guilt already because he felt like if he was with her, this wouldn't have happened in that way. And so he was dealing with his own guilt in terms of, because they were best friends since high school and they got married. And so it was a lot. It was a lot to go through in that way. And having a career as 3T kind of, it didn't balance it, but it kept your mind off of it because we were doing something in our mom's honor. And then once the 3T thing kind of, there was some political stuff with Sony going on, and our second album was held back basically, and for like 3 years, and we never got to release our second album. That was probably the hardest times because now my identity was gone in every way. I had at least built up this new identity, kind of like this stronger version of me. I called, it's Taj Jackson. Like at school, I was known as Terriano. On the baseball field, I was known as Taj. So Taj was like the one that was like, Terriano was the shy one. Totally shy at school. Couldn't look girls in the eyes. Couldn't do any of that, Taj was like the fake persona that I could be like, confident and in all those ways. But I was naturally shy. So I got the braids to kind of cover up my eyes and kind of make me feel like I was a different persona in that way. Because at that time, I didn't really like Terriano. Like Terriano was he was shy, he was intimidated, and he was unsure of himself. He had a lot of friends, but it wasn't what I wanted to be. And Taj was kind of everything I wanted to be in that way. Confidence.
Do you feel by doing that it helped you mentally, obviously, through the things you was going through at the time?
It did until the Sony hiccup with the 3 years, because then I lost that identity, and that identity was the one I was building towards. Taj was no longer viable anymore. And it left me with no one. Like basically because I had abandoned the Terriano persona. And so it took like 3 years to rebuild my confidence to kind of not merge the two, but be comfortable as Terriano, be comfortable without the braids, be comfortable, kind of mixing what I learned from, the 3T days and kind of mixing it all in, but not abandoning who I was in the past as well. And it was a lonely time. I joke about it now, but it wasn't funny back then, but it was a time of Counter-Strike. I played video games a lot during that time, and my curtains were always shut. And, I had a best friend that luckily, at least played with me to the point where I didn't feel alone. Because my girlfriend at the time had left as well. So it was like, I had not the support that I thought I would have in that way. And so it was a hard time, but you move on. You know, you move through it in that way, and I'm happier knowing that I'm kind of, I don't want to say mixture now. Now I'm just like Taj and Tariana are the same person. It's just, you know, it's now a nice mixture of the two. I
You found the right mind space.
balance,
Yeah, the
the
balance.
right balance. Yeah, the right balance in that way. And not only the right balance, just I'm comfortable in my own skin, which I wasn't back then. I was very shy, and there's a lot of things, even my voice, like, I, I knew in high school I had a good voice, you know, because I was like in choir, I was like head choir person, whatever. But then through puberty, my voice dropped like two, 2 to 3 octaves,
Yeah,
like, and so I went from a high soprano to a bass voice, and I wasn't prepared for that because now I'm not even singing the same notes, and I had a hole between the soprano and the bass. I had like this middle hole that my voice would crack when I would sing in that section, and it's still not repaired, but it didn't make me feel something that I always knew I could do. Now I couldn't do as much because I'd be, you know, scared to do it because if I cracked, it sounded funny in that way, and so that was another thing in terms of insecurities in that way, that something that I had very confident in, and then all of a sudden not as confident anymore. And I remember there was a couple performances with 3T where on Words Without Meaning my voice cracked, and then it cracked every night after that because it was like an insecurity in that way, and I never expected it to do that, but it's nerves and all that stuff as well.
with going back a little bit to earlier on. Obviously, with what went on with your mum,
Yeah.
and that. Did you feel that you had to grow up quite fast after your mum passed away? Or,
You know, that's a great question. I grew up using the word growing up.
yeah,
I existed wanting always to be a child. You know, I hung out a lot with me and my brothers hung out a lot with my uncle Michael,
yeah,
and he was very childlike and very and had that fun nature in terms of pie fights, water balloon fights, pranks, you know, jokes and all that stuff, stink bombs. And I'm like, this is the world. I don't want to, you know, why do I want to grow up? Why, you know, I would see my friends that wanted to be older, and I was like, no, I want to be this. Like, this is what I'm holding on to. And I held on to it as long as I could. But my mom always, even in the back of my head, she would always say, like, "You're the oldest." You know, when she divorced my dad, she was like, "You're the man of the house. Now you have to take care of your brothers. You know, you have to set an example for them." And so those kind of things were ringing in my head when she passed. It was more like, okay, now you have to be not the provider because I didn't have the funds to do that, but
yeah,
you have to be the parent in a way because my dad, you know, as much as I love him, he was still going through his guilt and whatever, and he was going through his loss with my mom
yeah,
in that way, and so he wasn't available to be the parent in that way. He was the child in a way because that's where he went with their, you know, and I don't fault him for it because everyone deals with grief differently. But I had to be the rock. I had to be the strong one,
yeah.
and to this day, I don't think I've properly addressed my mom's death or let it I don't know go like it still hasn't gone to where it
Yeah.
needs to go in that way. Like I've sheltered that section off, and I don't know if I'll ever get that section again, you know, because so I've not been able to grieve properly for that reason.
Yeah, because you felt maybe you had to grow up and be there for everyone else and not worry about yourself.
Well, and that's my natural nature anyway. Like that's nothing. I love doing that. I love being someone that's there for everyone. Like I've been that way my whole life.
Yeah.
And if people didn't need me, or people if I felt like people didn't need me, I'd feel empty. So I don't mind that. It was just I didn't get to grieve because I was so caring for everyone else.
Do you feel, obviously everyone with tragedies um, deal with it differently. Do you feel it affected your family members mentally going
Yeah.
forward? And do you feel they still struggle now?
Well, I definitely know with my mom's death because it was like the first death in the family, in the Jackson family, and it was my mom was loved by everyone. She got along with everyone. She was such a light, that everyone loved Dee Dee. Everyone that I've met loved Dee Dee. Like she was just, that was the type of person my mom was. She was someone that was always there for people, kind of like what I wanted, always there for people, but people loved her, and so it was hard because yes, people kept saying, "Oh, your mom was amazing," and this and that and whatever. But yeah, with our family, there was a big hole. There was a big hole, and my uncle Michael, he couldn't even attend the funeral because it hurt him so much. But also, he didn't want to detract from the attention that my mom was going to get because he didn't want it to turn into a media circus
Yeah.
in that way. And so I know he wanted to be there because he said he called us up and was like, "I really want to be there, but as soon as I get there, I know what, it's going to turn, the cameras are going to turn on me and it's going to be everything about me
Take it away from your mum.
and get away from, the importance of my mom and who she is and stuff like that." But, yeah, it was never the same with our family in that way. Cause my mom was, I don't even want to say a peacemaker in terms of like we were fighting or anything, but she was someone that always, it's like you probably have, or people know of people that like it's one friend attaches to another friend in terms of like you're the mediator of that. And so that friend wouldn't talk normally to that other person, but because of you, they're friends. It's like that's how my mom was. She was a bridger in that way. So a lot of people, connected because of her. And so when she passed, it was a little disconnect. But then we all came back together. But that's just how it was.
Yeah. Do you feel with that situation, you sort of become the bridge for everyone, and everyone turned to you to talk to?
Um, Not later on, yes, but not not when it came to my mom's passing and stuff like that. It was and it maybe it was because we were on tour a lot. It was like right after my mom passed, we finished the album, and then we had such success, first in America and then in Europe that we were always in Europe for the next 3 years. And so I think that kind of helped. But one of the things I forgot to tell you, which is an interesting scenario, is we finished our tour, the Brotherhood tour,
Mm.
and then we came back thinking, okay, we're going to record the next album, and we find out that the case, the murder case, is up for trial, basically. All the way up to that point, the DA refused to prosecute it, basically, and it was I mean, to us it was political because it was something he didn't want another high profile case. They didn't want high profile cases because the OJ Simpson thing at that time had blown up in their face,
Yeah.
and so they didn't want to take on another high profile name. So in the meantime, we suffered because the guy that murdered my mom was free for 3 years, basically.
Yeah.
Walking the streets and stuff like that. So that was hard. But then, I always say nosy, but she wouldn't care. But a nosy up and coming prosecutor saw a file cabinet thing that said Jackson on it and started looking through, and it's like, why hasn't this been prosecuted?
Yeah.
And it was only because of her that we got our day in court and that we were able to prosecute him in that way. But that was hard because there was not closure up until that point because he was walking free. The guy that did this to my mom in
Do you,
that way.
do you feel yourself or other people at that time were maybe going through, I don't know, some mental health issues in that time, like mentally struggling, that he was out in the street?
Oh, I think a lot of them were, in terms of, especially on my mom's side of the family, because they Dee Dee was everything to them. Dee Dee was like, in terms of, I come from two big sides of the family, two big families,
Mm.
but my mom was like the beacon on the Martez side of the family, and it just destroyed everything in that way, and we still haven't recovered on that side of the family from that. And I remember my cousin David, who already had mental health issues. You know, he had been hit by a bus when he was, I think, 12 years old. And so it stunted his kind of mental capacity. And we knew about it he's about, I think he's like 5 years older than me. So, but we knew about it ever since it had happened. And so as we got older, he kind of stayed the same, you know, mental capacity, but he's got a heart of gold, but it affected him more than anything because my mom was like his champion. My mom was the one that gave him work, like when hired him for his first job or this or that, or would pay him for babysitting because she knew no one else would, you know, that kind of stuff. My mom really, I don't want to use the word sympathize. She really embraced David, and she knew what David was going through, and she loved David. And so David took it really bad. And to be honest, it was hard for me to be around because it was hard to see that in that way because couldn't accept it myself. And then it's almost the extreme. Like I was trying to be strong and he was falling apart, and that's hard. That's a hard dynamic because I didn't want to go there because then I didn't know if I'd get back to being strong again.
Cool. So it was playing around in your head, and you didn't know what you should do for the right thing. You wanted to be there for him, but you also was thinking about yourself as well to a certain degree. It was like, I may be struggling if I do see him.
We did. Like that was the thing, you know. I mean, always David's one of my, you know, I'm very close to David and I love David to death. So I gave in. I mean, I will always be there for David, you know, and everything like that. It was just hard because every time we would see him, he would mention, you know, our mom and, you know, and it was hard in that way. Yeah.
Did David or any of your family members through that time or friends, did they go to see a specialist or counselling at all at that time? Or
I don't know if they did. You know, the hard thing about back then, there's a stigma, which
yeah,
there's not as much anymore, thank goodness. But back then there was a stigma, so therapy was something like, it's like, oh, I don't want therapy and this and that, you know. But so I don't know if they did or not
mm,
in that way. And that's the hardest thing because growing up, we were taught to be so positive, like, you know, mentally positive and all that stuff. And so I feel in certain ways we were equipped for a lot of things, but then no one ever equips you for grief in that way. There's until you hit grief, you don't know how to deal with it, and everyone deals with it different. So there's not a right or wrong way to do that. So
mm,
I would say in that way, the only thing I would, yeah, my mom's passing messed me up because I didn't, even with love like that, like there was, you know, it was almost like part of my heart was um, hardened. And so whoever was going to get my heart wasn't going to get 100% of it anymore because there wasn't 100% of it anymore.
yeah,
And I always felt guilty, like, you know, I'm not giving. It's almost like having that insecurity that the things you care about the most are not going to be there for you or not going to be there, you know. And I had that feeling with Taylor, my daughter. I It took a good 2 months to 3 months after she was born for me to bond with her because I was so scared that something that I was so happy and loved so much that it was gonna not be there and disappear.
mm-hmm.
And so that was the kind of the scariest part of it, was just because I didn't want to allow myself to be, you know, hurt. I don't even know how to say this, like vulnerable, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
then because it was like, oh, I hope it's not like my mom where, you know, it's going to get taken away from me. But I got over that as well. But that was kind of like, and I felt cheated in a way because I didn't, you know, bond in that way the first couple months because I was just terrified too.
Yeah. We'll touch on the stigma and stereotype a little bit later. So
Mm-hmm.
if we move on a little bit, as you say, like we spoke about your mum and obviously the tragedy, what happened, and people did struggle around it, and back then, mental health probably wasn't seen, as you say, as much
Yeah.
what it is now. Going forward, how did that? You spoke about not being able to get your music out for a period of time because of what was going on with Sony.
Hmm.
Did that affect you and or your brothers with
Yeah.
mentally not being able
Yeah.
to?
Oh, yeah.
Was that your release? That was your release to maybe help you go forward?
Well, that was, I mean, 3T was our crutch of dealing with our mom's death, in terms of releasing the album. We knew she was going to be proud of us as long as we were 3T. And when you no longer at a point can be 3T and you have an album that's literally stuck for 3 years and you can't do anything about it, and that's your identity,
Yeah.
that was very hard for all of us because in those 3 years, it wasn't like, we could do anything in that way. And so bills just kept piling up and so it was not an easy time in any case, in any stretch of the imagination. And because luckily the three of us were so close that we were each other's cheerleaders. At certain points, one of us would be like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then the other two would be like, no, 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 let's, we got to fight on and all this. And it just circulates whoever, like, it was weird how it worked, but it just worked in a way that we each became each other's cheerleader. But yeah, 3T was a hard thing for us because it was kind of like an identity we built up to counter our mom's death. And once that wasn't there, and you hear the fans and you hear everyone else saying, what happened to you? Where were you? And when we came out at the same time like that Backstreet Boys and NSYNC came out, and and Spice Girls, and those were like our peers in that way. Like we were performing the same shows they were
Yeah.
in, same venues and all that stuff. And then you sit there and you watch them explode and become even bigger, and and break records, and you're sitting on the sidelines watching people that you hung out on play video games with in a trailer now playing stadiums, and you're sitting at home not able to do anything. It was probably the toughest loss that we had to take in terms of financial and career wise, not in terms of person loss, but like in that way. So it was another loss. It was a loss of career or death of career in that way. And I don't think we've ever fully rebounded because that was us being on a major. So we at least felt like, oh, well, we have a big support system behind us, and we've never been on a major since. So it's been something that, we've been doing on our own now.
Yeah. So if we move on, obviously, like again, what was the story after once you was held up with your music, and then obviously going forward from then?
Yeah. So we basically had to let that album go, and that album still hasn't been released, and hopefully one day it will. But we picked ourselves up, and when we worked on another album, which was is it Identity? Yeah. Sorry. And it was about claiming our identity and reclaiming it, and it had a different logo, which since then we've gone back to the original logo, but it had a new logo, and it took a little while to do that album because it was almost like the love wasn't there anymore in terms of it was like a bad breakup, and then getting back together, and it's like it's not the same.
Yeah.
It takes some healing, and so it was that hard in that way in terms of it. But we put the album out, and certain songs did really well, like "Stuck on You," which is a tribute to was Lionel Richie's song, but our dance version of it did really, really well, and so it gave us the confidence. Okay, there's still a market for us, because we released Identity in 2004, so that's like almost probably 9 years after our first album,
Yeah.
and that's like unheard of at that point to release something so far away. All your fans have grown up to a certain point, and it was a scary time, and we were just hoping that the fans would be there, and they were. and we were just very appreciative of it.
Yeah. So obviously, it was that a massive relief, mentally and maybe physically, like because you probably would have been drained through it and everything like that. What had gone on, and other things what have gone on as well. But was that a massive mentally a release, like to now be back and understand that you did have your fans were still there.
Well, I think the benefit of everything we've done with 3T has been the fans. Period. You know, the fans have kept us afloat. The fans have been there for us, and I think if the fans weren't there, then that would have been it. You know, for us in that way, because we were praying that they would be there. We were recording and writing for the fans,
Yeah.
and the fact that they were there made it worthwhile, because at a certain point you're not writing for yourself anymore. You're writing for the appreciation of other people, and hopefully that they'll maybe get the songs, or the songs will help them out in some way or another. So that was kind of why we were doing it. And because there was still politics involved with the music industry, and whether it's a distribution industry, and that was still always off-putting for us, because it was almost like, why do we have to go through all this business junk to get our music out there? Just, we want it to go to the audience and we want them to appreciate it. Why do we have to deal with all these other hurdles? And that happened a lot with Identity as well. And so it kind of, that was off-putting, but the fans counterbalanced that amazingly. And so I would say, which is one of the reasons I'm known, and you might not know this, or maybe you do. I'm known to spend a lot of time with the fans, with the fans, just because I really care for them. I really love them. Like, I feel like if they have an energy and appreciation for me, you know, I want to know who they are, and I want to have that same appreciation for them. And so, and I did that since the beginning, because I never took fans for granted. I never took our stardom for granted at all. But it's one of the things I'm most proud of, not chart positions or whatever. It's my connections with our fans.
Was that something you taught yourself, or was that something was taught from within your family, with Michael, with your mum as well beforehand, and say, look, these are let's be honest, the fans can either make you or break you. Really, if
Yeah.
they don't support you, then they may be against you. So
Mm-hmm.
they're what put you there. But all
Yeah.
good, well, that obviously, no offense, but obviously the Jackson name as
Yeah.
well helped. But
Yes. Oh, yeah, of course.
fans keep you there, don't they? So
Yeah.
was always your plan, or family plan, to always turn around and say, look, we need to give back to the fans, or we need to support and be around the fans? Because I feel like nowadays, even from my point of view of I'm very obviously football
Yeah.
orientated,
Yeah.
like that. I feel like sometimes professional footballers or professional industry,
Mm-hmm.
they don't give back to the fans, or they don't
Yeah.
hang around to be around the fans. But was that always your mindset to, I need to give back?
You know, I grew up watching it. You know, as a kid, when you watch it and you watch your uncles or your parent do it, you know, and my mom was always quick to remind us and humble us in certain ways. And it's not like we had egos ever, but she reminded us, you know, and our dad did too. You know, money doesn't grow on, you got to work for this. You treat everyone the same, equally, no matter who it is. We were brought up that way. We were brought up to treat, you know, the person that opens the door for you at a restaurant or hotel or whatever the same way that you would treat a record exec, you know. And we did. And I think it was my dad, you know, he was coaching Little League at the same time that he was on the Victory Tour, and he was selling out, you know, arena stadiums and breaking records. And I always saw that, and I was like, wow, here he is just coaching 12-year-old boys, you know, play baseball. And then he, you know, the next at night he's going to Dodger Stadium and he's going to rock out on the guitar and play in front of 70,000 people. And I just always loved that about him. And then as I grew older, I would see, you know, how my uncle Michael, you know, cared about his fans and loved his fans, truly loved them. And that was my goal. That was always the the um, the blueprint in that way. And I think I never, and I think this was the thing. If I never thought of the fans as commodity. Like if you think of, I think that's the problem with today's world. Everyone thinks, oh, they're just, they're numbers. They're things that that can buy stuff. I thought of them as friends, and because of that, I think that's why 3T has had such a great relationship with our fans, and is because we are kind of like family and friends and stuff like that, and finding out who is having a child, or here's my child, like she grew up or he grew up, or it's just it's exciting and it's fun, and you feel like a big family in that way. And I think that's why 10 years 15 years later they're still there, because you're always there for family and friends. And so and it's not something that we purposely plan. I don't even think about it. I like people. I'm a people person, and so I care about them.
Do you feel that helped you through some, obviously, the hard times of what you was going through and your family, that being the bond of and having that support um, helped you by having that bond and having the release to maybe talk to people
Yeah.
about some issues and that?
Yeah, I think the fans, not only for me, but I know even my Uncle Michael, like the fans were everything. They were the ones that kept him going. They were the ones that, through all the crap that was thrown at him, they were the ones that were still there, that propped him up, that said, "It's okay, we got you." And I think that is what kept him going in that way. And I'm so appreciative of the fans, and I'm so appreciative that even today they are doing that. And I think that's the difference in a way, because they felt connected to Michael because he felt connected to them. And you're right, in today's world, it's all about, like, how many likes you get, or, and all that stuff. And that's all you care about. Like, that's all. And that's why I can't get into it really that much, is because
Yeah.
there's not really a connection there. There's just like someone pressing a button to say, well, and it's like, oh, I got X amount of subscribers. It's like, so
Mhm.
for me, I've always liked participating and talking to the fans and all that stuff, and actually feeling connected.
And I think that helps. That helps when we're talking about mental health or issues, what need promoting. That's 100% what is needed.
Yeah.
Is that what you feel as well?
Yeah, well, it's a support system. And I think that with mental health, you need a support system in general with anything, um, acceptance and a support system. And we had our support system, luckily, in that way, with the fans and with our friends and stuff like that. And it's, yeah, I don't even want to think about how that would have been different if that wasn't the case in that way. Well, I guess, leaving Neverland is something that has kind of been different in that way, because some of our support system wasn't there, and some of it was, and some of it was different. But I got it from other ways and from other people in that way. And so it's kept me going. It's kept me realizing that I'm not alone in this journey, and I'm not alone in all what's going on, but also that it's my time is appreciated in a way, because
Yeah.
I am making a sacrifice when it comes to my daughter, in terms of time I'm spending with her, and watching her grow up and stuff like that. I'm not being as selfish as I should be, in terms of like just being like, oh, I'm just going to focus on my, but I also know that this is so important for her as well, and her legacy, because the Jackson name is very important for the world, in terms of not only through music, but through charity and humanity.
Yeah. So, yeah, moving on again. So the next step, what was it? The next step going forward, once the new album or the new
Oh, the
music was released.
um, it was it was interesting, because it did really well in certain territories, and then other territories it never got even released. So that
Mhm.
was kind of frustrating for us. Um, so we had spent a lot of time making this album, and we were very confident and proud of it. But that was kind of a shift in terms of, okay, what do we do now? because we've released another album, and it hasn't done what we thought it was going to do, but people still appreciate it. And so it was just a matter of grinding. And you know, my brothers at the time had started families, and so they were kind of focused on that more as well. So music wasn't as important. I was the only one that didn't have a family back then. And so I was still focused on that. I was still like, oh, you know, I could stay out there on the road for as long as I needed to, but they couldn't. They wanted, you know, they wanted to come home to the family. So it was just a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
But then what ended up happening was that probably 2000, we would do these writing sessions because we knew that we were going to make another album. And so we did these writing sessions. We'd write, and then we'd go to Vegas to write lyrics and melody. You know, that was like our little place to go. You would think that'd be a distraction, but for us it wasn't. You know, it was actually like a calming place. And I'll never forget the day that we were supposed to officially start working on our album is the day that we saw that my uncle had passed, basically, you know, or that was, you know, whatever the Chiron was or whatever on team. And we were at Terrell's house, and because that's where we did most of the recording and stuff like that. And it just changed everything, changed every dynamic. And the only thing we could think of was we have to be there for his kids, like he was there for us.
Yeah.
And so we dropped everything and we went and we made sure that they were okay. Because not only because we felt equipped because we had dealt with it somewhat, but we had spent so much time with our uncle and his kids at that time. So we saw the dynamic. We knew we had spent time knowing what he wanted from them, and, you know, and seeing them interact. So it wasn't something that was like, oh, well, we're just guessing here. No, we knew what he wanted. We knew how he wanted them raised. And so it just felt like we have to be there. We have to step in. And so we did. Yeah.
Did you feel, once obviously that happened and it was a complete shock, do you feel you blocked that out because you had to obviously be strong for his kid?
The weird thing about my uncle, which is different than my mom, because I saw my mom every day, I could almost in my head think that my uncle was on tour. And, you know, because there would be times when my uncle would be on tour and I wouldn't see him for a year, you know, and sometimes we'd go visit him on tour and then he'd continue on tour and we wouldn't see him for a year. So in my head, I was just like, oh, you know, he's off on tour in a way, like that kind of, it was almost like tricking my mind into thinking that he's still here, but he's not, he's just not here, you know. That was the difference between my mom's passing and my uncle's passing. Then there's certain things and certain events that reality kicks in, you know. The first one, the main one, and the first one that I really accepted that he wasn't here was when my daughter was born, because he would have been the first one to call. He probably would have been there if he could have. He would have been the first one to call because he loved babies and he always wanted us to have babies, you know, in terms of that, like that, in that way. So he would have been the first one to call or congratulate me or anything. And when that call didn't happen, I knew, like, okay, this is real. He's not ever coming back in that way. And but it's interesting because I sense him and I feel him all around, and my mom as well. My mom's more of like, she keeps me on track. You know, it's almost like if I'm steering the wrong way, something will, like, intuition wise tell me that's not the way you're supposed to go. Stop fighting it. Go this, and it's never steered me wrong. My uncle is more of like a comforting thing. Like whenever I feel down or whatever, he kind of reminds me that he's here watching, or he's got it. You know, that kind of hand on the shoulder, like you're not alone. I mean, no pun intended for the song, but you know, it's like that's been my uncle's thing. And in all honesty, watching my daughter, I'm looking where she usually stays when we feed her. You know, the most interesting, beautiful thing for me was when she was like a baby, and she'd look up in the sky and just smile and like start giggling or whatever. And I was like, I always felt like my uncle was playing with her, like, you know, like making faces, and she was giggling because it was like she was seeing something that I couldn't see with my own eyes, but she felt that and saw that. And there's that connection because she literally, like, I mean, I don't freak anyone out, but there's a lot of connections, and she's seen him already. You know, like when the first picture that she saw of him, like she put her hand on his, you know, like it was a big poster, and she put her hand right next to him and all that stuff. Like she's already seen him, and she already knows him in that way. And I thought that was amazing, and I always feel comfortable. I always feel like, okay, she's lucky in a way, because you know, but it's yeah.
Yeah. So, um, how did your brothers and family react to obviously Michael passing?
It was, you know, the hardest thing with everything is the family dynamics. You know, even with regular people, and I say regular in terms of people that are not in the spotlight, um, there's inner fights, and there's, you know, this person wanted this. No, he wanted this, or he wanted that. He wanted to be buried here. No. He told me on this occasion he wanted. It's no different with our family. The problem is that we had a magnifying glass on us. We had, you know, literally, you can't go through those discussions like a normal family. You have, you know, it's spread around the news, and it's like, oh, you know, they're squabbling, or whatever the word is, and you know, they're fighting, and it's a trying time, and it's a time that you're still grieving, and we didn't get that privacy aspect of it, and so what you end up doing is you're experiencing grief for the whole world to see
Yeah.
in that way. And so I think that was hard too, because then you can't grieve this normally like you normally would grieve, because everything's watched and everyone, you know. But I'm proud of how our family handled it in a way, because we had the world watching. There's so much, because my uncle belonged to the world. He didn't just belong to us.
Yeah.
And I always say that, like, even when people go, "Oh, but you were family, so you know, must be equally hard on you." I'm like, no, but he belonged to you too. And so, you know, I never dismiss someone's pain that they feel, you know, when it comes to my uncle, or their love for him in that way. He belonged to everyone, and saying that, it was I'm using the word nice, but it was nice to feel that sorrow from other people, because it reminded me how important he was in a way. And it reminded me that my grief wasn't just alone, it was everyone's grief. And he was important to everyone. And so it really sugarcoated a lot of that stuff in a way. So it was helpful to see people. That's weird. It's helpful not to see people's pain, but to see their sorrow and how much he meant to them.
Yeah. That's what I was about to say. It was like, even though it was painful, it was good to see people
Appreciate him. Yeah.
appreciate him,
Yeah.
and that probably helped you in a way, sort of adapt to it, and look how much the world loved Michael.
Yeah. And the thing is I always knew it. Like, I was on tour with him at times, and you know, with my brothers, and I saw the world how much they loved Michael, but then it was always the newspaper and the tabloids that always tried to downplay it and trying to make it seem like he wasn't loved, or he's slipping, or he's failed, you know, or oh, he doesn't have a market anymore, you know. And then they, just like they did with in the UK, they made him seem like he was washed up, and then he you know, sold out, you know, 50 shows in less than a day. It's like, that's the, you know, so there was reality, and then there was what they were trying to make it seem was reality when it came to Michael Jackson. It's just, it was nice that for that one period, everyone was on the same boat. Everyone was appreciating him. Now, that didn't last forever, but even the tabloids and whatever were kind of not as harsh. And, you know, some of them even called him King of Pop and all that stuff,
Yeah.
which they wouldn't call him when he was alive. There was like self-proclaimed King of Pop or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was just different.
Um, Obviously, moving on from Michael's death, and obviously it would have affected the world, and all his supporters, and also your family. At that time, do you feel there was enough help, maybe, or was there still a stigma behind mental health if people were struggling with Michael's death?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, it's interesting because I feel like sometimes if there's a community or if you feel like you're part of a club that is dealing through the same thing, it's not easier, but it's more comforting in that way. Like even for me, like as I said, like feeling that everyone else was feeling the loss made me feel not as bad in that way. And I feel that with the with what I learned and what I watched with the fans, it was like a lot of them leaned on each other in that way, because it was like certain people couldn't understand why his death meant so much to certain people. So there, but then other people reconnect. I saw some friendships reconnect that hadn't connected in 10 years in a way because of his death, you know, because they knew that the other person would understand it, what they were going through. And so the only thing I would say with the mental health area of that is that it hurts me when it comes to a public figure and people downplay it. Like, well, he was, you know, you didn't even know him. Why would you care? You know, I think that's very dismissive, and not to do that, because you don't know someone's connection to someone, whether it's an actor, comedian, you know, a footballer, or anything like that. It's what they meant to that person in general, and their connection to that person, and that person could have, you know, kept them going when they had suicidal thoughts. And you know, a saying or a goal or anything could have made it like, I want to see that next game, so I'm not, you know, I'm not going to do anything because, you know, he wouldn't want me or she wouldn't want me to do that. There's all these different scenarios. So that's the only thing that always bothers me, is when people downplay fandoms in that way. Now, saying that, there are, you know, some fandoms that take it to the extreme, and the Michael Jackson fandom can do that at times, whatever. But there's just some bad apples in everything, you know, in that way. But in a whole, it's an amazing fandom, and I'm happy to be proud to be part of it, basically.
Yeah. Um, Obviously going forward again, now, and as the years went on and everything what was going on around Michael's death, and when you had the funeral, do you mentally, or do you physically as well, resent some of the things what had happened around Michael's death, from certain people?
Um, I think the hardest thing is when the family gets blamed for his death. You know, I know, just being part of the family, there's a lot that we tried to do in general. You know, there's but no matter who it is, you're only as good as your access to that person. And there's a lot of people that were not letting the family around, and so that was hard as well. But yeah, I got lost in the question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Taj, what I'm going to do is, as we mentioned, this only gives us an hour, so
Mhm.
there's a minute left. I'll log off and come back on. So I'll be back in literally like a minute time.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. I'll see you in a second. Please, everyone, return. I'll be back in a couple of seconds. This only gives me an hour, so I'll see you in a second.